Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Crista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. We're going to talk about some tips to really make sure that that side sprint is as successful as possible, as quickly as possible. So let's back up and start with the good old side hustle. I'm sure you are very familiar with this, might even be how you started your business back in the day. A side hustle is typically something that you're doing to generate revenue that's in addition to your main source of income. So you see this a lot with people who have full-time jobs or corporate careers, and they're either trying to get some supplemental income coming in, they'd like to make more money and they don't have that ability in their career or in their job, or their job or career just really doesn't allow them to do something that they're really passionate about, that they want to be able to invest time in. So the side hustle is really pretty common for people who have careers or who have jobs. And many of us start our businesses that way. I know I certainly did, where I was working full time, I was consulting, and meanwhile, I was building my business on the side. I was investing a ton of time and energy and money into that business, trying to get it off the ground so that eventually I could get to that point that I could be full time in my business. And I know many of my clients are doing the same. For some of you, you may still be in that place. For many of you, you've since made the transition, but you started there. So if you think about the concept of there's something you do on the side to generate additional revenue in addition to your main source of income, that's something that we continuously do as we grow and level up our businesses. And at the time that we actually already have our successful businesses, I don't think we want to be thinking about this as a side hustle. You know my feelings on the word hustle, not a big fan, kind of has a desperate energy to it. It's a work harder, not smarter type of approach to things, just kind of doing all the things to figure out what works. And there's some validity in that. That's not the way that we want to be approaching things, especially at the stage where we already have a successful business and we're doing something in addition to our core source of revenue for our business, usually as a means of growing or scaling our business. And so this is where I'd like to introduce the concept of the side sprint and share with you a little bit more about what that is. So if you're unfamiliar with the term sprint, this is used a lot in Agile, which is what I do when I consult with a lot of my corporate clients. And it's a defined period of time that's usually anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. And what I really like about the sprint is that it's both a defined period of time, but it's also a period of time with a defined capacity. So when you're doing this thing on the side, you have a very clear and intentional number of hours that are being dedicated to it, whether it's just you doing it or whether it's you and your team. In addition, there's really clear outcomes. So you're not just hustling and randomly working really hard and trying to figure out what's working. You're very intentionally going out and trying to achieve certain outcomes during that defined time box within the defined number of hours that you've allocated to work on building this thing. So sometimes you're doing outcomes such as launching or actually delivering that product and working with your clients. Other times you're doing things more like research and just validating and experimenting to see if the ideas that you have and what you're trying to do are going to be truly the right next step. The key with a side sprint is that it's something that you're not doing within your regular schedule. It's something that actually is extra time or money or energy that you're allocating and doing in parallel. And while there's periods of time in your business where this is very valuable and sometimes necessary, you also run a really high risk of leading to overwork, overwhelm, and ultimately burnout if you do this for an extended period of time. So you do want to be really intentional with what you're doing. And there's 3 different things that I want to share with you that can really help you to get results really quickly. The first one is I had mentioned outcomes, and you really want to have an outcome-focused plan. Be really clear on the results that you are looking to get, the experiments that you are trying to run, what you need to learn, and what you need to actually achieve. and develop really clear plans around that. So, I'm a big fan of lean strategic planning. I think you should absolutely leverage that, but do that with really specific outcomes and do it in a sprint format. So maybe for you, it's a 1-week sprint. I find that for a really small team or for a solopreneur, 1-week sprints make a lot of sense. The larger your team, sometimes 2-week sprints make more sense. You look for yourself and say, what is that time box that makes sense? How many hours do you want to allocate during that time box? So let's say it's 10 hours per week you're going to put on your side sprint, and then get clear on what those outcomes are that you're looking to achieve and what you want to be validating during that time. And then from there, you want to measure your results and you want to adapt your plans as needed. So one of the keys to lean strategic planning that I think becomes especially important here is you're not trying to commit to how you are going about achieving something. You're committing to the outcome. So what do you want to learn? What do you want to achieve? Be flexible in how you get there and allow those conversations with your customers or with your ideal target market to influence what you do next. Allow the things that you learn and the results that you get if you're launching, for example, to influence what you do next. We don't always have all of the information and all of the details figured out up front. That's why we have the side sprint. And so this is your opportunity to go in and do it. So the 3 steps are: start with that outcome-focused plan. Treat what you're doing as small experiments. Be really clear on what you want to learn and what results you want to get, and design small experiments around it to make sure that you're doing that in whatever the time box is you have for your sprint. And then measure your results and adapt your plans as needed without locking yourself into the how upfront. So here's a couple words of warning: is it's not always a side sprint. And side sprints can be very tempting, and sometimes they are more of a distraction than they actually are an evolution of your business. The first scenario is for all of you who have natural workaholic tendencies. And that is, don't leverage the side sprint to give yourself permission to overwork. It can be really tempting when you want to do more and you want to add something to your plate and you want to take something new on, to consider it a side sprint and think that it's okay to allocate that extra time to it. The key with a side sprint is it has a defined end. You don't always know what that end is because that's part of the outcomes and you trying to get the results and experimenting, but it has a defined end. And at the end, you are replacing something that you are currently doing. You are getting your time back. It's not a permanent addition. So I've shared with you guys before that when I launched this podcast, I had to make some really conscious decisions about what I was going to say no to in my business to create the space for the podcast. The podcast is a good example of something that is not a side sprint. It is something that is a permanent thing that I am doing in my business. So instead, I had to figure out what I was going to say no to create the same number of hours, if not more, in my schedule to be able to realistically commit to record, produce, publish, promote the podcast. When you're adding new things into your business that are going to become part of your regular business model, that isn't a side sprint. That is something that you have to just figure out how to incorporate in. Now, on the flip side, the transformation that I mentioned to you that I'm currently undergoing in my business, where I'm completely replacing my primary revenue stream from working with these big, large corporate consulting clients to working exclusively with solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and coaches, consultants, and thought leaders, that is very much a side sprint. And I have specific time that I allocate to that every single week. And eventually, and very soon, actually, I have some big exciting things coming, but that's a topic for another day. I am going to holistically replace what I'm doing with my corporate consulting clients. Now, another example of something that sometimes gets confused with a side sprint, and it's not, is a passion project. Just a word of caution there. It is perfectly fine to have passion projects. I encourage all of you to have something that you do on the side and allow yourself the space to actually focus on it and fully enjoy it, and don't feel the pressure to have to make money from it or to have to turn it into a business. More often than not, passion projects are just that. They're passion projects. They should not be side sprints and they should not be incorporated into your business. So just make sure that you're really checking and validating that your side sprint is a legit side sprint. You're not giving yourself an excuse to simply overwork or to add something else to your plate without taking something else off that you really should, or to just simply turn every great idea that you have into a business and try to monetize it and end up actually diluting the brand and confusing your customers, right? That's the opposite of what we want. And as always, my final tip for you here is to keep things lean. When you have a side sprint going on at the same time as you're running your core business, keeping things lean are more critical than ever. If you think back, if you started your business as a side hustle, you probably had a blessing built in that you might not have even realized or appreciated. But when you've only got a set number of hours to focus on something, you tend to not have a lot of waste in what you do. You tend to naturally be very lean because you're really intentional with the limited time that you have. As you're working on your side sprint, be really intentional with how many hours you want to allocate to it and keep things lean. If you can lean things out in your core business so that you do not have to allocate as much additional time and you can instead bake it into your schedule, that's even better. But oftentimes you can't. That's why it's a side sprint and why you're doing it. In addition, just make sure that the things that you are investing in, like we say with lean all the time, are the things that are going to add value to your clients and profit to your business, or the things that you're doing that are going to help you validate that will be the case if you don't know yet. I hope you find the side sprint something valuable that may be something that you can leverage in your business when you're going through periods of transformation or where you're introducing something new, where you're trying to do multiple really big things in parallel. Have an amazing week, and I will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.